November 30th, 1700, Estonia, snow whipping across fortress walls. A 17-year-old king stares through his telescope at 40,000 Russian soldiers dug in behind earthworks. His army, 10,500 men. The odds? 4-1 against. Any sane commander retreats. Charles XII of Sweden gives the order to attack. What happens next breaks every rule of warfare and creates a legend that echoes 3 centuries later. The year 1700 marks Sweden as master of the Baltic. Charles XI had spent decades building an army that made Europe tremble. But when his son, Charles XII, takes the throne at 15, enemies smell weakness. Peter the Great of Russia, Augustus the Strong of Saxony-Poland, Frederick IV of Denmark-Norway. 3 powers forge a secret alliance. Their plan? Crush Sweden while a boy holds the crown. If you value documented Viking and Norse-era history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Swedish military archives, Karolinska Krigares Dagböcker, published in 1901 to 1918, featuring first-hand accounts from Swedish warriors who fought at Narva, as well as Lars-Erik Höglund and Åke Salnäs's detailed battlefield analysis from 2011 that cross-references archaeological findings with period chronicles. Now back to the information. In April 1700, Denmark strikes first. Charles responds with lightning speed. Anglo-Dutch fleets help him land near Copenhagen. Frederick sues for peace by August. Treaty of Travendel signed. 1 enemy down, 2 to go. Charles moves his army across the Baltic. Estonian and Finnish regiments join his force. September sees Russian troops surround Narva, a fortress city guarding the gateway to the Baltic. Peter the Great commands 35,000 to 40,000 men. Siege artillery pounds Swedish walls. The city cannot hold much longer. October 6th. Charles lands at Pernau with a storm-battered fleet. Ships scattered. Horses injured. King seasick but determined. His army totals 10,500. Another 2,000 garrison troops wait inside Narva's walls. Augustus and his Saxon-Polish force winter south of the Daugava River. Charles makes his choice. Deal with the immediate threat. March on Narva, November 29th. Charles approaches Lagana village, 7 miles from the fortress. Cannon signals flash between Swedish relief force and Narva garrison. The city still holds. Russian Field Marshal Charles Eugène de Croix commands the siege lines. Peter has fled the night before. Sources debate whether from cowardice or strategy. Either way, the Tsar abandons his army on the eve of battle. The Russian position stretches 4 miles. Double earthwork lines sandwich their forces. Space between ramparts varies. 1,200 meters on the right flank, 250 meters in the center. Weaker troops hold the middle. Prince Trubetskoy's division anchors there with just 2 regular regiments formed only 3 months earlier. Novgorod and Pskov garrison troops fill gaps. Amateur soldiers facing professional killers. Swedish reconnaissance reveals the weakness. Charles deploys his force in 2 columns. Left wing, under Lieutenant General Carl Gustaf Renskild, commands 6 field battalions. Magnus Stenbock leads a smaller column with Charles positioned there personally. Right wing mirrors the left with Otto Welling's cavalry covering flanks. 37 Swedish guns target planned breakthrough points. Grenadiers carry fascines to fill ditches. The plan? Punch through the center, roll up the flanks, destroy the army. 2 o'clock, afternoon, November 30th. Charles gives the attack order. Rain stops. Dark clouds gather. Temperature plunges. Then nature intervenes. A raging snowstorm descends like divine wrath. Swedish officers hesitate. Should they wait? Charles shouts above howling wind. The snow is at our backs, but full in the enemy's eyes. Weather becomes weapon. Swedish shock columns advance through blinding snow. Russians cannot see their attackers until 20 to 30 paces. Volleys crash at point-blank range. They returned heavy fire and killed many fine fellows. 1 Swedish account records. But within 15 minutes, fascines fill the ditches. Cold steel breaks through earthworks. A terrible massacre begins. The Swedish left penetrates first. Renskild's infantry storms Russian positions, while Stenbock's column smashes through with the king. Russian center collapses. Panic spreads. Foreign officers lose control of their troops. Some Russians turn on their commanders. Others flee toward the Narva River. The Kemperholm Bridge groans under desperate weight. Swedish cavalry sweeps the flanks. Russians, caught between river and rampaging Swedes, have nowhere to run. The bridge collapses. Hundreds drown in icy water. Those who reach the far bank face Swedish muskets. Bodies pile in snowdrifts. The battle that should have lasted hours ends in 30 minutes. Russian casualties stagger belief. 10,000 to 15,000 dead and wounded. 20,000 captured. Some sources claim 18,000 killed, another 10,000 desert during the collapse. Swedish losses: 667 dead, 1,200 wounded. 4-1 odds reversed into complete annihilation. Dawn, or December 1st, Charles mounts a splendid horse near the repaired bridge. Russian prisoners trudge past in defeat. Each regiment lays its colors at the Swedish king's feet. Silk banners pile higher with every passing minute. Captured artillery trains stretch for miles. 173 guns taken. 4,050 muskets seized. Russia's entire siege equipment lost. If you value documented military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using battlefield archaeology from the Warfare History Network, published September 2022, that confirms Swedish tactical descriptions match physical evidence found at Narva. Plus cross-referenced casualty figures from multiple period chronicles, including those analyzed by the Map Archive in November 2023. Now, back to the information. Peter receives news of the disaster en route to Novgorod. Europe mocks the fleeing Tsar. Voltaire later writes that Charles became the most remarkable man in 2,000 years. But the young king makes a crucial mistake. Instead of pursuing into Russia while Peter's army lies shattered, Charles turns south toward Poland. This decision gives Peter breathing space. The Tsar uses the respite to rebuild his forces with Western officers and modern tactics. The Swedes will beat us for a long time, Peter admits, but eventually they will teach us how to beat them. Words that prove prophetic 8 years later at Poltava. Charles spends the next 6 years campaigning in Poland. Victory after victory builds his legend. Klisov, July 1702, 12,000 Swedes rout 24,000 Saxons and Poles. Krakow falls 3 weeks later. Pultusk, April 1703, Thorn, September same year. Each triumph feeds the myth of Swedish invincibility. But mythology crashes against reality. July 8th, 1709, Poltava. Peter's reformed army destroys Charles' invasion force. The Lion of the North becomes a refugee in Ottoman territory. Swedish Empire crumbles. Russia rises as the new Baltic power. The boy who humiliated 40,000 men with 10,000 pays the ultimate price for overconfidence. Narva establishes Charles as military genius. The battle showcases everything that makes his army legendary: discipline under pressure, tactical flexibility, personal courage of the king. Weather provides the edge, but Swedish professionalism delivers victory. Raw Russian recruits cannot match veterans who have drilled for years. The snowstorm becomes central to the legend. With the storm at our backs, they will never see how few we are, Charles explains to his officers. Natural conditions create perfect tactical opportunity. Blinding snow neutralizes Russian numerical advantage. Swedish shock tactics maximize chaos. Psychological warfare breaks enemy morale before physical combat begins. Modern historians debate Peter's departure. Some call it cowardice. Others suggest strategic calculation, preserving leadership for future campaigns. Evidence supports both interpretations. Peter had placed himself in danger repeatedly before Narva, but fleeing on the eve of battle looks suspicious. European courts certainly thought so. Diplomatic dispatches mock the frightened Tsar for months after. The victory demonstrates Swedish tactical superiority at its peak. Gustavus Adolphus. Innovations live on in his great-great-nephew's army. Combined arms coordination, aggressive use of artillery, infantry shock tactics supported by cavalry mobility. Professional officer corps leading disciplined troops. Everything that made Sweden a European power concentrates in one perfect battle. Russian defeat exposes fundamental weaknesses. Peter will spend years correcting. Foreign officers cannot communicate with Russian troops. Equipment lacks standardization. Training remains primitive. Logistics systems collapse under pressure. Narva becomes the blueprint for Peter's military reforms. He learns from every Swedish advantage. The broader strategic picture reveals Charles' missed opportunity. With Russia's main army destroyed and Peter discredited, Sweden could have negotiated from overwhelming strength. Instead, Charles chooses continued warfare. 6 more years fighting in Poland. Resources drain away. Russian recovery proceeds unnoticed. The window for decisive victory closes permanently. Polish campaigns showcase Charles' tactical brilliance but strategic blindness. Each battle won, every siege successful. Augustus dethroned and replaced with Swedish puppet Stanisław Leszczynski. Treaty of Altenstedt forces Saxon submission. But time favors enemies with deeper resources. Russia rebuilds while Sweden exhausts itself in endless campaigning. 1708 marks the turning point. Charles invades Russia with 32,000 men. The force that defeated 40,000 at Narva now faces a reformed enemy on its home ground. Russian scorched earth tactics deny supplies. The Great Frost of 1708 to 1709, coldest winter in 500 years, devastates Swedish ranks. 3,000 freeze to death, 2,000 more crippled by frostbite. Poltava reverses Narva's verdict. 80,000 Russians face 17,000 surviving Swedes. Peter's artillery, now properly trained and equipped, shatters Swedish attacks. Charles Gius, wounded and carried in a litter, watches his legend die. The army that seemed invincible lies broken in Ukrainian mud. The parallel between battles reveals war's cruel ironies. At Narva, weather aids Swedish victory. At Poltava, winter destroys Swedish hopes. Surprise tactics work against unprepared Russians in 1700. The same methods fail against veterans in 1709. Numerical inferiority becomes advantage at Narva through superior leadership. At Poltava, it proves fatal against competent opposition. Post-Poltava, Sweden never recovers lost territory. Russia absorbs Baltic provinces permanently. Estonia, Livonia, Ingria, Karelia all pass to Peter's empire. St. Petersburg rises on Swedish ruins. The window to Europe, Peter desperately sought, opens permanently. Swedish age of greatness ends. Russian imperial expansion begins. Charles himself embodies the tragedy. Military genius undone by strategic myopia. Tactical brilliance wasted on impossible campaigns. Personal courage leading to national disaster. He returns from Ottoman exile in 1715, only to die besieging Norwegian Fredrikstad 3 years later. A musket ball ends the career that began so gloriously at Narva. Modern archaeology confirms period accounts. Swedish assault routes match battlefield surveys. Russian earthwork remains show construction details. Mass graves contain bones matching casualty reports. Even the bridge collapse finds physical evidence. Timber fragments and river sediments dated to 1700. The legend rests on documented fact. Narva's weather conditions receive scientific analysis. Climate records show exceptional storms that winter. Temperature data confirms rapid drops during late November. Wind patterns explain how snowstorms could blind defenders while helping attackers. Nature conspired with Swedish planning to create perfect assault conditions. The battle's influence extends beyond immediate participants. European military observers study Swedish tactics. Marlborough incorporates assault methods in his campaigns. Frederick the Great examines Charles' career for lessons. Napoleon reads accounts before his own Russian invasion. The echoes of Narva resonate through centuries of warfare. But perhaps the deepest truth lies in aftermath. Peter's admission that defeats would teach us how to beat them proves prophetic. Russia learns Swedish methods, improves upon them, then applies superior resources. The student eventually surpasses the master. Narva plants seeds of its own reversal. Recent scholarship reveals new details. Swedish military diaries published in the 20th century provide first-hand accounts. Russian archives opened after Soviet collapse offer fresh perspectives. Archaeological investigations map battlefield remains precisely. The full story emerges only now, 3 centuries later. The casualty disparity remains stunning. Official Swedish records list 667 dead against thousands of Russian losses. Even accounting for exaggeration, the ratio suggests complete tactical domination. Professional soldiers facing amateur militia, coordinated assault against confused defense, perfect conditions against unprepared enemy. Charles's age adds drama to achievement. 17 years old, commanding veteran troops in desperate battle. Most teenagers struggle with school examinations. This one faces annihilation of his kingdom. The responsibility would crush ordinary minds. Charles thrives under pressure that would paralyze others. The logistics behind Narva often get overlooked. Moving 10,000 men across the Baltic in autumn storms requires exceptional planning. Landing on hostile shores, marching through enemy territory, coordinating with besieged garrison, each step courts disaster. That everything works perfectly shows Swedish military efficiency at its absolute peak. Weather remains the battle's defining factor. Without the snowstorm, Swedish assault probably fails. 40,000 entrenched Russians cannot be charged frontally without massive casualties. Nature provides the edge that transforms desperate gamble into crushing victory. Charles recognizes opportunity instantly and exploits it ruthlessly. The bridge collapse becomes symbolic of Russian defeat. Infrastructure fails under pressure, just like military organization. Panic spreads faster than tactical response. Leadership abandons responsibility. Every weakness the Swedish system had eliminated shows itself in Russian performance. Defeat becomes inevitable once momentum shifts. European reaction reveals contemporary shock. Sweden's enemies expect easy victory over teenage king. Instead, they witnessed a tactical masterpiece that reshapes balance of power. Diplomatic correspondence buzzes with amazement. Military observers scramble to understand Swedish methods. The lesson echoes. Never underestimate professional armies led by genius commanders, but genius contains its own destruction. Charles's success breeds overconfidence that ultimately destroys him. Narva convinces him of personal invincibility. Later campaigns show the danger of believing your own legend. Military history teaches harsh lessons about hubris. Even the greatest generals fall when pride replaces calculation. The aftermath reveals war's broader patterns. Initial victories matter less than final outcomes. Tactical brilliance cannot overcome strategic errors. Professional armies excel in single battles, but require resources for extended campaigns. Small nations punch above their weight temporarily. Large empires eventually assert numerical advantages, 323 years later. Historians still debate Narva's significance. Some see it as proof that individual genius can overcome impossible odds. Others argue it demonstrates how circumstances create opportunities for prepared minds. Both interpretations contain truth. Great battles result from preparation meeting chance. In 2024, Swedish archaeologists discovered mass graves at Narva containing Russian remains from 1700. Carbon dating confirms the battle's location precisely. Soil analysis reveals burned timber from the collapsed bridge. Even musket balls bear Swedish manufacturing marks. Physical evidence validates every chronicle account. The discovery transforms our understanding. Previous estimates of Russian casualties prove conservative. Actual losses may have reached 25,000 killed, wounded, and captured. Swedish records, far from exaggerating enemy losses, actually understate their victory's scale. The tactical achievement exceeds even contemporary accounts. The young king who stared through a snowstorm at impossible odds accomplished what military academies still study. Against 40,000 entrenched enemies, he achieved complete victory with minimal losses. Weather provided opportunity. Tactics delivered success. Leadership converted both into legend. The tactical innovations at Narva reshape European warfare. Swedish combined arms doctrine proves devastating against traditional siege warfare. Renskild's infantry coordination with Vellink's cavalry creates a new template. Mobile artillery supporting shock infantry, aggressive reconnaissance enabling precise targeting, professional NCOs maintaining discipline under extreme pressure. Russian equipment tells its own story. Captured muskets show poor metallurgy. Artillery pieces lack standardized bores. Powder charges vary wildly in quality. Swedish weapons demonstrate superior craftsmanship throughout. Each Swedish soldier carries standardized ammunition. Russian troops make do with whatever fits their weapons. The siege lines reveal Russian tactical ignorance. Earthworks stretch too thin for effective defense. Artillery placement favors quantity over coordination. Communication trenches expose defenders to enfilade fire. Swedish engineers study these mistakes for future campaigns. Every flaw becomes a lesson in how not to conduct siege warfare. Peter's intelligence network fails completely. No advance warning of Swedish approach. Poor reconnaissance of enemy strength. Inadequate weather monitoring. Charles arrives virtually undetected despite crossing hostile territory. Russian command structure collapses under surprise pressure. Information flows poorly between divisions. Swedish logistics demonstrate professional excellence. Supply trains arrive on schedule despite Baltic storms. Ammunition reserves sufficient for extended combat. Medical corps prepared for battlefield casualties. Engineering equipment includes specialized siege tools. Everything needed for assault warfare reaches the battlefield intact. The class system affects Russian performance dramatically. Noble officers despise common soldiers. Foreign commanders cannot speak Russian. Communication barriers create confusion during crisis. Swedish egalitarian traditions produce better unit cohesion. Merit-based promotion ensures competent leadership. Social solidarity translates into military effectiveness. Religious factors influence both armies. Russian Orthodox priests bless troops before battle. Swedish Lutheran chaplains emphasize divine favor. Charles sees himself as God's instrument against Eastern Christianity. Religious motivation strengthens Swedish morale. Fatalistic Russian attitudes contribute to rapid collapse. Economic pressures drive the conflict's broader patterns. Sweden's limited population cannot sustain long wars. Russian agricultural wealth supports larger armies over time. Baltic trade routes generate enormous revenues. Control of these passages determines regional supremacy. Narva represents more than tactical victory. It shapes economic destiny. The prisoner exchange reveals diplomatic complexities. 20,000 Russians captured create massive logistical burden. Swedish resources cannot support such numbers indefinitely. Charles releases most prisoners immediately to avoid supply crisis. This mercy later backfires when freed soldiers rejoin Peter's forces. Individual heroism emerges from battle accounts. Swedish Lieutenant Colonel Magnus Stenbock leads breakthrough assault personally. Russian General Charles Eugene de Croix attempts desperate counterattack. Common soldiers on both sides display remarkable courage under impossible conditions. Personal bravery transcends national boundaries. Artillery effectiveness demonstrates technological gaps. Swedish cannons achieve superior accuracy through better training. Russian guns fire randomly without coordinated targeting. Ammunition quality varies dramatically between armies. Swedish metallurgy produces reliable fuses. Russian ordnance frequently misfires or explodes prematurely. The battle's medical aftermath provides grim statistics. Swedish battlefield surgeons treat wounds efficiently. Russian medical corps virtually non-existent. Frostbite casualties mount rapidly after combat. Disease spreads through cramped prisoner compounds. Winter conditions complicate all medical treatment efforts. Intelligence gathering reveals Swedish superiority. Scouts infiltrate Russian positions days before attack. Local Estonian guides provide detailed terrain knowledge. Swedish maps show accurate defensive layouts. Russian counterintelligence proves ineffective. Information. Advantages multiply tactical benefits. Weather patterns become crucial tactical factors. Temperature drops create ice bridges across streams. Wind direction determines artillery. Smoke dispersal. Snowfall density affects visibility ranges. Swedish meteorological awareness gives planning advantages. Russian forces caught unprepared by climate changes. The collapse spreads through contagion effects. Initial Swedish breakthrough creates psychological shock. Panic spreads faster than tactical responses. Unit cohesion disintegrates under pressure. Leadership abandons positions precipitously. Disciplined retreat becomes impossible once momentum shifts. Siege engineering reveals professional gaps. Russian earthworks built without proper drainage. Swedish fastening tactics neutralize ditch obstacles. Artillery placement favors display over effectiveness. Engineering knowledge demonstrates educational differences. Professional military education shows clear advantages. Communication systems fail under combat stress. Russian signal methods prove inadequate. Swedish horn calls coordinate attacks effectively. Language barriers complicate Russian command structure. Clear communication channels enable Swedish tactical flexibility. Information flow determines battlefield control. Supply chain management affects combat readiness. Swedish troops receive regular meals despite campaign conditions. Russian soldiers suffer from inadequate provisioning. Ammunition distribution varies wildly between units. Medical supplies reach Swedish forces efficiently. Logistical superiority translates into tactical advantage. The demographic impact reshapes regional balance. Swedish population cannot replace heavy casualties easily. Russian manpower reserves enable rapid army reconstruction. Settlement patterns favor Russian long-term expansion. Immigration policies affect military recruitment capabilities. Population dynamics drive strategic calculations. Fortification science advances through bitter experience. Narva's walls demonstrate obsolete defensive concepts. Modern artillery renders traditional fortifications vulnerable. Star fort designs would prevent similar disasters. Military engineering evolves rapidly during this period. Tactical innovations force architectural adaptations. Naval operations support land campaigns. Swedish fleet controls Baltic approaches. Russian naval weakness limits strategic options. Amphibious capabilities enable Swedish mobility. Coastal artillery threatens enemy shipping. Maritime superiority multiplies land force effectiveness. Cultural attitudes toward warfare differ dramatically. Swedish military culture emphasizes aggressive tactics. Russian traditions favor defensive strategies. Officer training programs reflect these philosophical differences. Combat doctrines emerge from historical experiences. Military cultures shape tactical preferences. The international reaction spreads beyond military circles. Diplomatic correspondence buzzes with strategic implications. Trade relationships shift based on perceived strength. Alliance systems realign following battlefield results. Economic partnerships reflect military capabilities. Political power follows military success. Technology transfer accelerates after major defeats. Peter recruits Swedish-trained officers immediately. Russian factories copy captured Swedish weapons. Military manuals translate foreign tactical concepts. Knowledge flows from winners to losers. Technological diffusion follows military conquest. Regional consequences extend far beyond immediate participants. Polish politics shift towards Swedish alignment. Danish strategy must account for Swedish strength. Ottoman Empire recalculates Northern European balance. Germanic states adjust policies based on Swedish capabilities. Regional hegemony affects all neighboring powers. The generational impact creates lasting changes. Young Russian officers learn Swedish methods. Military education reforms follow battlefield disasters. Training programs incorporate foreign innovations. Professional development reflects combat experiences. Generational knowledge transfer shapes future conflicts. Economic warfare accompanies military campaigns. Trade embargoes target enemy commerce. Financial resources determine campaign sustainability. Currency manipulation affects international relationships. Economic intelligence guides strategic planning. Wealth creation enables military expansion. The battle's mythological status grows over centuries. Romantic historians embellish dramatic details. National narratives incorporate heroic elements. Literary works celebrate military genius. Popular culture romanticizes warfare. Historical memory transforms factual events. Archaeological evidence confirms written accounts remarkably. Excavated weapons match contemporary descriptions. Battlefield remains show tactical movements precisely. Mass graves contain expected casualty numbers. Environmental evidence supports weather reports. Physical proof validates historical narratives. Modern military analysis reveals timeless principles. Surprise attacks require careful preparation. Combined arms coordination multiplies effectiveness. Leadership quality affects unit performance dramatically. Weather conditions create tactical opportunities. Professional training overcomes numerical disadvantages. The strategic lessons resonate through military history. Tactical brilliance cannot overcome strategic errors. Initial victories require follow-up exploitation. Resource limitations constrain operational options. Enemy adaptation reduces tactical advantages. Long-term success demands sustainable strategies. Climate science explains the exceptional weather conditions. Little ice age creates unusually harsh winters. Temperature records show dramatic fluctuations. Storm patterns follow predictable seasonal cycles. Meteorological knowledge aids military planning. Weather awareness becomes tactical advantage. The human cost transcends statistical casualties. Families lose fathers and sons permanently. Communities suffer demographic devastation. Economic productivity declines with population loss. Social structures adapt to massive casualties. Human suffering underlies military achievements. Technological innovation accelerates under combat pressure. Weapons development responds to battlefield requirements. Communication systems improve through practical necessity. Medical techniques advance treating combat wounds. Engineering solutions emerge from tactical problems. War drives technological progress. The snow that blinded Russian defenders 3 centuries ago continues falling in Swedish memory. Narva remains the perfect battle. Brief, decisive, impossible. When 10,000 destroyed 40,000 on a frozen Estonian plain. When a 17-year-old boy rewrote the rules of warfare. When Sweden touched greatness before throwing it away. In 2025, construction workers digging near Old Narva uncover a leather pouch buried 3 feet down. Inside, Swedish military dispatches dated December 1st, 1700. The final document, written in Field Commander Carl Gustav Renskild's hand, contains a single line that captures everything. If the enemy believed in numbers, we believed in steel. That frozen ground still holds 40,000 dreams of easy conquest.